session.
Going live in one.
Okay, coming back live. Okay. Weird. And we are back live. I think it was a technical issue that caused the session to end. Guys, the end button actually ends the whole session and not only our participation. So let's hope that we're back and the people are listening.
I'm back as well, Marton. I don't know if you can hear me better now.
Much better, right?
Yeah.
I would even risk turning on the video if I were you, because the audio quality is like big time better.
Okay, I won't.
Wow, you know what, Marton, there is a question for you because of all your statements about ops being cool stuff. And the question is about people who started coding mainframe and used waterfall in the last 10 years, which is like a very traditional programming thing. How can these people adopt DevOps philosophy and turn this into a stimulating experience? How do you manage these people who are used to very traditional engineering waterfall to adopt this cool stuff of yours? What's in it for them?
Yeah, very interesting question. And it's extremely important to actually understand our organization or your organization. Because when you want to introduce something, you need to actually have the change management to be applied. You need to have, let's say, like an ambassador of the problem, that you want to actually introduce in your organization globally. Now, the answer actually truly for this is partnerships. And partnerships here could be internally and could be externally as well. So that's what I'm actually seeing in our organization, that people turn into, let's say, micro groups, and they form partnerships. And different groups actually have set up a strategy as well, that they want to go beyond the horizon. Beyond the horizon is actually what they actually used to do, and they want to make a step forward. When we talk about partnerships, people tend to think also outside of organization partnerships. So that could be also trainings, and why not collaborate with a consultancy company or a consultant that's actually fast tracks these processes. Because if you have let's say a huge organization, or you have an organization that has done the same thing for the last 10 years, change management will be hard without external help. And external help can help actually to make it this fast track for this. And I'm seeing nowadays in 2021 that one of the future stuff about DevOps will be these partnerships, either internally or externally, but it will be much more critical to fast track some operations.
So it is about partnering, whether internally or not. Viktor, where do you stand? How would people who are coming from extremely traditional, and thank you for the mainframe example, it doesn't get more traditional than IBM mainframe, how do they start adopting that kind of mentality and start really thinking, working on a daily basis in a different way?
By firing all the managers first who allowed it to happen in the first place?
Ooh, that's a violent approach, I would say. I mean, come on. It's easier said than done. Organizations have legacy tech. Legacy tech is needed by the business.
So the thing is that we are all shaped by the environments where we live in and stuff like that, right? So yes, if you spend 10 years, 20 years in a company that is still very legacy, I think that and that probably goes in line with what Marton said, the only way to kind of break away is to bring fresh blood that already experienced that something, and that will guide you in a way, right? So when I said firing, I was half joking. I don't really mean firing, but I do mean that you need a change that is not internal, right? Because if you were internally trying to change for 10 years or 20 years and you didn't, then that doesn't work. So you need to bring somebody from outside. Whether that's one person or 100 people, that really depends on the size of the organization and things like that. And so change from outside is the only way if the internal change did not work for a long time.
Okay, so maybe from me, Eduardo, just to complete the answer, I on a personal experience basis, I understand what Viktor is talking about. You need to bring in some fresh people with fresh ideas. So if you have a team of people who used to work in a certain way, then they need some sort of an incentive to start going on that process that Marton mentioned, doing these partnerships, doing something about it, changing the way they work. And usually there is no better incentive than bringing aboard somebody who will disrupt the routine and will just come in. And yes, by the way, no matter if you fired the managers or it's the same managers, these disruptors need to get some sort of backing, right? They don't need to be brought in sort of like weirdos. Oh, they are different, but actually they need to be brought in with a very centralized agenda of, all right, these people are bringing the spirit and the experience that we would like to adopt for everyone. And then, of course, everything is possible. Eran, if you can hear us, would you like to share your experience of transforming organizations that used to work in traditional engineering ways into organizations that adopt the DevOps philosophy and then methodologies?
And how you hear me? That's
actually a great question,
and I think I think that actually you want to start small. Okay, I'm not talking about small, but a bigger organization. Transforming a big organization, moving it from legacy to microservices and other advanced services. You need to start with a small POC. You need to start with a smaller project. You need to invest a lot in training. Okay, guys needs to understand not just how to implement it, but also the value. They need to come with passion to these changes. I don't think it's talk a lot. You don't need to fire anyone, or you just need to invest in the employees, but really start with a chunk or a smaller project. Easier as a proof of concept to the other teams, and then roll it to part of the organization. You cannot do it in one day, and you cannot do aspects of your project. You need to make it in a very smart way. And I can tell you, people will say, okay, it's not that even Perfecto, we were very kind of mono legacy, and we moved one by one to microservices through an agile coaches, DevOps professional. Transform our way. Yes, we might have way. Let them go. They felt that they don't fit in this, and they left. It took some time. I'd say it was between 6 to 9 months. Start seeing the small, then expanded.
All right.
One thing I would add is that you also, I agree with starting small, with picking one of the teams, but the important part is that whatever that small is, it needs to have certain autonomy to bypass the existing processes and rules, right? Because usually it's the existing rules that are holding people down, and you cannot change them overnight. But you then need to create a team and say, hey, this team is an exception, kind of like, they do not need to follow our processes, go. Otherwise, if you need to follow all the processes that you accumulated over 20 years and rules and what's not, then any attempt is going to fail. Doesn't matter whether you bring a new tool or a new person, right?
You know what? That's a very valid approach, but then it brings a certain question. So Eduardo, who has raised the original issue, represents a company that has existed for some years. You know what, guys? As a matter of fact, if we put aside young startups, most of the companies we deal with are companies that exist for some years, definitely have legacy technologies. For them, that may not be legacy, that may be the cash cow or the main company's business, and still they are legacy from the DevOps perspective. So the question is, okay, you start small, you give independence, you push the disruption and give it managerial approval. But wait a second. Our goal is not to remain small, right? The goal here, as Eran mentioned, maybe not in a week, not in a month, not in a year, but eventually, if we believe in this, our goal is to not leave any stones unturned. And here's my question to you guys. Think about different organizations, not necessarily places where you work, uh, companies you interact with. How adopted into DevOps world are they today? Would you say that yes, most of the companies I meet are already 100% on board with this philosophy, or would you say, I don't know, 20%, somewhere in between? I'm very curious to hear your opinions. Maybe Marton, we'll start with you.
Who? That's actually a very interesting problem. We should have more panelists to have all slice of the pies for this to get a clear explanation. I can share one more experience of mine outside of the outsource business, which is, let's say, small teams. And I've chatted with a friend who is part of a big telco company. And in telco, there are industry standards as well that they need to follow and maintain for their hardware, and also the policies and standards in developing something. Now, these people turn out actually to be challenged by the reskilling theme. So if they set up a reskill of their things, and they set up conferences, going to conferences, attending workshops, they actually open their minds. And after they opened their minds, this was like 10 years ago, they started to actually shift into more open environment, OpenStack. And here on the OpenStack, I'm not on the container side, like the word that it's open, the doors are open. That's what I'm actually want to say here. And after that, they turn out to be actually not a tech organization. They turn out to be a data company. And when this strategy was set and they become a data company, they realized 7 years later, like 2 years ago, that they are no longer a data company. They are a moving data company with a lot of DevOps stuff also incorporated, and with DevOps also hardware and also monitoring. And monitoring is a key word here that I want to touch base, because that actually fast scaled their DevOps culture. That's how they become today a DevOps company that has a strategic CTO only for the DevOps part inside the tech company, because they figured out that it's extremely fast to adapt to changes. 10 years ago, they were not able to adapt to changes, but they actually turned out with two strategy changes, first to data company and then to actually DevOps culture with own CTO to actually set the strategy. So this is an experience I have heard. I'm not lived this experience, but it was fantastic for me that a big organization who is having the legacy base was able in 10 years, like DevOps has entered in the second dozen year of it's already 13 years we talk about DevOps. So this telco company was able to change 2 times in this time frame in order to get it into the DevOps world.
Sounds fantastic. Actually, so there is an end in the light of the tunnel, even for very traditional organizations, and telcos are not known to be particularly fast-moving. Just to frame the context, for our question, we are talking about a financial institution, right? So slightly different, but still very much data, very much information technology company. So, Viktor, on to you. How would you imagine a very traditional, large and established financial institution moving into DevOps, and how much of this transition would have to be supported not only by the technical IT people who would probably have the predisposition, but actually by the business? How much would this financial institution need to realize, like in Marton's example, that they are not a X company, but they're actually a Y company?
You're muted.
Bigger companies tend to pretend that they're doing something until they're really threatened. And that is what is happening really now with banks. I mean, let's face it, banks are saying, financial institutions were saying that they are doing some drastic changes and so on and so forth for the last 30 years, and they did not. Now they are. Simply because now they're threatened. Now they understand, they see that they might not be able to buy all the fintechs in the world and kill the competition like that. So that sounds kind of bad and strange, but for a bigger company, the real motivation is always financial. And financial motivations are really effective when you are threatened by competition. Now, in the financial sector, competition for most of the history meant usually that the size matters. Now it doesn't. Small companies are killing it right now in financial sector. So they are finally changing for better. Now, what they're changing and what is much more important for them is to begin with going cloud, adopting Kubernetes and stuff, all the good stuff that we all know. And something closer to DevOps would be that actually they need really, really strong SRE teams, right? Now people interchangeably mix kind of SRE, DevOps, sysadmin, all the same thing, but it's really about removing those bottlenecks, which are usually in security and sysadmin operational department, and then that's really SRE culture.
So to sum up this point, what you're saying is that the motivation always has to be connected to business, otherwise nothing will happen, right?
Of course. I mean, let's face it, that's motivation is always business. Kind of, we are all motivated by business. I work most of my time with open source. I still need to feed my family, right? Kind of like business is always a motivator, whether on the individual level or on a company level, and especially in companies. Either you're small and then you're trying to figure out how to create a business that will attract investors, or you're huge and then you're trying to figure out how you can continue being huge. And in case of financial sector, it's mostly the latter case, right?
Let's sure hope so. Indeed, financial sector is usually kind of following big companies. By the way, those of you who are interested in chiming in, there is a poll with some sample of how deeply is DevOps adopted in your culture, and you can give some sort of give or take results. So, Eran, where do you stand? So you mentioned Perfecto as a company. Have you worked with large companies, traditional sector companies, financial companies, maybe logistic companies, and so on, and seen them doing the transformation to DevOps, and how did it work?
Definitely. Perfect solution works mostly with enterprises, and actually, I would say 60% or 70% the largest financial institutions of the world, likes of Bank of America. So I've seen them transform, and without repeating things that were correctly said earlier by the panel, I would actually say one word that really drove their success, and that's automation. And it's not just for testing, it's automation of the entire pipeline, automation and making efficient daily activities that really remove a lot of the barriers for moving from one software iteration to the next. Without automation, it's going to slow you down. So what I've seen in my career with and working with so many as they turn real DevOps was investment in of processes, automation, environment setups, data automation. Financial institutions need to work against sometimes live production mock data, and if they cannot keep up with all the changes, they are really not really working. And so environment setup, automated processes, automated pipelines was organizations to transform and be more efficient. But to your other point earlier, roughly 30% are there. Okay, the maturity is not that high. People are still releasing much slower than they would.
That makes sense. By the way, you know what? I buy in to the automation statement for a reason. And the reason is this. Why does the sort of like conjunction of development and operations somehow always lead the discussion to automation? You know, the reason for me, at least, and I'll be happy to hear your guys' opinions, is that when an engineer faces a problem, and it could be any problem, right? Like the old joke, how many engineers does it take to change the light bulb, right? Engineers usually look at every problem as an opportunity to build a mechanism rather than to go in manually, rip things off and fix it. And that approach of us actually trying to build a mechanism that will solve not only this problem, but maybe all kinds of similar problems, or maybe the same problem when it comes time after time after time, this is what gives birth to the fact that so many problems that used to be solved manually in the past are nowadays being solved by automation. Personally, you know, I'm a founder of an automation and orchestration company, so I live, breathe automation on any possible level, including my smart home automation right here. Still, the question about adopting automation. Do you think that just automating everything is the way to force people thinking about problems in DevOps way? Is that the thing? Viktor, where do you stand on adopting automation in any aspect of your professional life?
It's easy. I mean, developers, as you said, developers want to automate. Developers write code, and automation is code. Let's start from there, right?
Yes.
Automation is code. Automation is not clicking buttons somewhere. It is code. Developers write code. It would be very hard to imagine developers not wanting to automate stuff or not automating stuff. The real issue is that we had and still have in many cases that split into groups. These are developers, and then we have shared services, operations, sysadmins, blah, 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 which are traditionally, and I'm not saying in all cases, but traditionally filled with people who do not write code, who are not developers.
Yes.
That's going to the very beginning of our conversation. Everybody is or should be a developer. There is no place in this industry for not developers. I mean, maybe if you're a manager, that I can.
But then you're an ex-developer turned manager. Wait.
Hopefully, I mean, but at least among engineers, let's put it like that. Engineers in our industry are developers. Developers have no problems automating stuff. They do that without you asking them. The problem is that we have like many people in testing roles, operations roles, this and that, shared services, especially shared services, which are usually in charge of automations. Kind of, there is a shared, in big organization, there is a shared service that is creating all junky jobs for everybody. And then developers have no incentive to help because that's not their department. And the shared services have no idea what they're doing because they're not developers. The problem is not being a developer. That's the real issue there.
All right, that's a nice view of the world, Marton. I'm afraid to say, are you a developer? Do you view yourself as a developer? Do you view people who surround you as developers? Be very careful when you answer it. I think you're on mute now, or at least we stop hearing you once again.
Yeah. Automation should be something out of the box and part of the code nowadays. And I need to mention also failure acceptance and accepting failures with the means that automation needs to be improved. I tend to see that people put it in place and they forget it about. And the same solution stays there, for example, for 6 months. And then they want to change it and they forget how they put it together. Also, what I'm seeing is that organizations that that they build specification in a way that automation is part of the delivery. It's already part of the delivery. It eases the building out the project, because you don't need to convince the client that you need automation, and you have put there an estimate that covers 80 hours for automation that they didn't want it or they didn't request it. It's not part of the contract. So I'm also seeing this shift that a good specification should hold the part of the automation and should be set as the same language of conversation how different parties want to build out automation as well. As once it's delivered, the solution, everyone, also those who put in place and those who will operate the platform, needs to understand how these things are working. So I'm seeing that there is a lot of improvement here. And going back to my experience on Stack Overflow, I see a lot of people vouching out for a solution where there would be an ops platform for managers and also an ops platform as the developer side of way. And managers should be able to overview and have some action on this automation as well. Literally, right now, they have access only to some bar charts and some monitoring stuff, but not as a verb to do an action on it on the platform. But it could be good that, for example, when they have a failure, to stop a campaign, because often people, when you have an outage, you don't automate stopping an ads campaign. You could stop it for 2 hours, those things. And these kind of automations that the business and marketing product team should be interested of, and build out the scale also in their world for this.
See, there is a problem. There is a thing I disagree with what you said. You said include automation in estimation, right? I think that's terribly wrong. I think that's understanding as if it costs more to have things automated. It doesn't. It costs less to have things automated, right? If I'm a developer, if I'm building my application, let's say building, of course I'm going to write script that will build it for me, and that will save my time. It will not increase my time. So saying, hey, we need to add automation into estimations, ignoring now cases when I have 20 years of legacy and I don't know what to do with it, which is a completely different story. But of course, I'm not going to include it in estimations. It lowers my estimations. It does not increase it.
Wait, I have a challenge for you, Viktor. And you know, I will not probably be the first person that will tell you. Let's play a small game. So you are bringing all these claims, and I'm telling you, look, I'm understaffed. My people, you know, they are developers, but they're not used to building deployment automations, monitoring automations, packaging automations, etc. My managers are choking me the way it is. You know, I'm way too busy to write automations. This is a paradox. This statement, I'm way too busy. How do you deal with that? Because many people have to deal with that.
Can I ignore from what you said just the part of we don't know how to do it?
Okay, sure. Second, right? You could teach us how to do it. That is solvable.
Yeah, okay. So that's solvable, right? Kind of, but precisely we don't have time is precisely the reason to do it. It's a paradoxical. It's not that because we have too much time to waste, therefore we're going to automate. No, it's the other way around. Automation helps us go faster.
You know what? So I happen to know that Eran is an author of a book on automating and accelerating quality assurance, software quality assurance testing. So Eran, this is a great question. For years, all of the organizations would bring aboard armies of manual testers, right, that were very busy doing manual testing and so on. And then, of course, automating testing, it's became a big thing in the industry. How did it happen? How did you come to a team, not necessarily you, but still, team of 20 people, very busy people, really chasing after bugs every day on a manual manner? How do you break this vicious cycle and make them automate instead of just keep on doing that thing they were very busy with? So how did it happen in quality assurance?
Easy, and I would actually
not agree little.
I would agree a lot. The timing to all these manual activities, over and over again. Because think about that. It's not just each filter, each software release. The time actually to do this exactly boring thing that takes you so much time. If invest once in automation and on maintain the entire team. And I'll tell you another thing: when you're just doing, there's a limit to what you can do. Less fast, a lot of escape defects. The business, business drives automation. So they want to drive time to market. Blocked, there is a lot of dependencies and quite slow.
That kind of makes sense. There was a short question here about, so we spoke about automation and how it transforms everything. How about augmenting deterministic automation with artificial intelligence, machine learning, processing data, and so on? Let's do a very quick sort of like round. Do you guys think whether this is something that is coming on the horizon for adoption as on top of existing deterministic stuff? So, Marton, where do you stand on adopting AI to delivery, to kind of software pipelines and so on?
Yeah, I would separate AI and machine learning with a brief of thing that AI creates stuff, creates something that doesn't exist. Machine learning classifies this or predicts based on experience. So I would mostly talk about ML, and I would rephrase what I already told, that first, to turn into a data company. If you are a data company, you know what is analytics, how you accumulate data, what you run out of your data warehouses, and then you can actually leverage machine learning on existing data. DevOps and automation data should be part of your, let's say, transactional operational data, and then you can automate stuff of it. I would say that this should be also offered by the frameworks that you use or stacks that you use. So actually, I'm not seeing a company or us building out a special ML solution for our, let's say, pipeline, but I would use, if it was part of a framework that we currently use or you use, for example, for website development, and it could be configured out of the box. So I would say that if you are developing in an open source world, if you are creating libraries, if you are developing frameworks, modules, whatever, please make use of machine learning and give us the machine learning value in the DevOps world. So that's actually the adoption I'm seeing next in the next 5 years of this world. On top of that, there could be cloud managed solutions that provide some kind of AI ops, and they could market this thing as something super smart stuff. But this would be a vendor lock-in and probably will be another, let's say, marketing, bullshit that they want to convince us that their services are great and why to move there, because you will have, as a universal developer, right, access to ML-driven automation, ML-driven incident reports, rollbacks, and those kind of operational goodies, whatever those are. So my take is that ML will be the next thing in the next 5 years, but I would love to see in frameworks, libraries first, and then global adoption beyond the horizon.
Victor, how about your life on the open source lane? Do you face with these technologies a lot?
Right. I mean, I agree with what was just said. 5 years or something like that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that right now it's mostly selling smoke. I mean,
Selling air, you mean, rather than smoke?
oh, okay. Depends on the language. I mean, selling air. It's really all the solutions. Most of the solutions I've seen, they're really faking it more than really doing it. If you're talking about out of the box solutions, we're still not there. We will probably be, right? And that's that constant struggle, right? That our jobs are always about moving above what is already solved, automatable, what's or not, right? You were a tester that was clicking buttons in the past, and then you had to move to being a tester that writes code as tests, or actually not being a tester at all, being a developer. And soon it will become machines are testing our stuff. You need to figure out something else to do. That's coming for sure.
Eran, do you have an experience with adopting, probably Marton is right, more of a machine learning approach to streamline things?
Yes. You an AI machine learning book. So that various phases of the DevOps, from observability and log analysis, even in automated code reviews, AI machine learning. I think that we are at next point in the industry with a lot of open source and other commercial solutions around AI machine learning. I would keyword machine learning are still automation, because what it does, very complex problem, it automates efficient way, even if it's led by human, it's not replacing the human. Solve a very unique problem, dealing with big data from a log perspective of observability without intelligent tools. It will take you into issues on your environment or in your an internal environment. So I do believe a lot in the transformation in my mind is already started.
Thank you for that, guys. This session has been a blast, but it has come to an end. If I had to sum up, it seems like we all agree on the fact that everyone should be an engineer. And probably the next thing for DevOps is indeed turning that should into a reality in all kinds of organizations worldwide, and thinking of pretty much every problem we face, not as something that we need to push a couple of buttons and make a couple of mouse clicks to solve, but actually how to build a mechanism that will hopefully prevent that from happening. Thank you so much, guys, for joining this discussion. I hope that these thoughts, questions, and answers were useful. That's it for me, I guess. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day at this conference. And of course, tomorrow as well, there are tons of interesting sessions that I at least definitely intend to check. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank
Bye.
you.